I really believe that oneness theology is the greatest theology of all time when it comes to the definition of God. Hear me out for a few minutes and see if you agree with me or disagree. I've been looking at some videos that I did a long time ago on Dr. Summers, Benjamin Summer, who is a leading Jewish scholar of our time. And as I was looking through his book and the podcast that he's made, I was reassured of one thing, that Jews today are learning that there is a fluidity to God. What does that mean, fluidity? Well, Dr. Benjamin Summers explains it as God manifesting in a smaller way so that to be in the world and to be seen by the world and for the world to experience God, God manifests himself in different ways. Thus, the fluidity of God. Some people will claim that Dr. Benjamin Summer agrees with the Trinitarians, but that is the farthest thing from the truth, because he acknowledges in his book and in most of his podcasts that he's not a Trinitarian. If he thought the Trinitarians were on the right path, he would look into it and maybe accept it. But he says, no, I'm not a Trinitarian. And of course, he's not a polytheist either. He doesn't believe in the many gods because he's a Jewish scholar. What I want you to understand is that Dr. Benjamin Summer, his ideas came from looking at the Bible, the Old Testament especially, and seeing how God would manifest in different places at different times. He uses the examples like, for example, Adam and Eve, that God walked with Adam and Eve in the garden. That is a manifestation of God, because God in his entirety, God in his wholeness, God in his greatness could not fit into the Garden of Eden, could not possibly be seen by Adam and Eve. So he manifested, he took on a form so that Adam and Eve could understand and even contemplate that God was with them, walking with them in the garden. There's many more examples. Dr. Benjamin Summer uses the one I like, is that Moses saw the burning bush and God was in the burning bush. It was really the angel of the Lord. But Dr. Summer says that is another example of the being of God as he manifests in a smaller way so that he could be seen and understood by his creation. I can go on, but to me, this is a beautiful example of believing in the oneness of God. For many, many years, we've been saying this, that God is one, but he manifested in the flesh. This is what the Bible tells us in 1 Timothy 3:16. Of course, the New Modern Translations have changed it to not say, great is the mystery, God was manifest in the flesh. They changed it to he. But not even that will take away, because if you read the context and then you read how in other passages it describes the Son of God as being God manifest in the flesh, then you know that there's no contradiction here. So I like that. I like that the Bible teaches that there's only one God, and that God manifested in the flesh and was seen of angels and was seen in the world and so forth. That is another type of fluidity, another type of manifestation. If Dr. Benjamin Summer was a Christian, he would agree with us 100%. The Trinity can never fit the mold of fluidity. Why? Because when the Trinity was introduced and then later developed up to the Council of Nicaea, the founding fathers of the Trinity, the Apostolic and Ante-Nicene fathers, they described God as one being, yet three beings or persons. Wait a minute, what are you saying? I'm saying this, that even Tertullian said that definitely God is two beings, and with the Holy Spirit, three. He was referring to John 1:1. So from the beginning, the Apostolic and Ante-Nicene Fathers taught on a three-person, three-being God. And so that contradicts the fluidity of God, because if you have three beings, then you have three gods. And that's why the early Christians did not accept the Trinity. They actually rejected it and accused Tertullian of being a Gnostic or following the teachings of Valentinus. And it was true. Now, then how come today Trinitarians are saying that God is one being, three persons, but the persons are not beings? Well, we owe that to Dr. James White and his book, The Forgotten Trinity. In The Forgotten Trinity, James White explains clearly the basic definition of the Trinity. And he says that we cannot say that the persons are beings, because that would contradict everything, and that would make three gods. And he was right. So that's why he covered it up in his book, and that's why modern Trinitarians are covering it up by saying God is one being, three persons. But the reality and the truth is that the founding fathers of the Trinity did not believe like that. So these modern Trinitarians are lying about the Trinity doctrine. And that is something we need to look at very carefully. The Trinity is false, not only because it's not in the Bible, but because they're teaching that the three persons are not beings, when all along people like Justin Martyr, like Theophilus, like Tertullian, like Origen, and others were teaching that the three persons were beings. So I consider the oneness doctrine to be the greatest theology on God. Unitarians are wrong because they deny that Jesus is God. And like I said, Trinitarians are wrong because they taught three beings, three persons. Now they're trying to cover it up, but it's too late. They've been found out. Someone here is lying. Someone here is not telling us the truth. And who gives the authority to change the definition of the Trinity doctrine? One of the greatest things that I've come across is that Trinitarians will not admit that it was a Catholic Church that gave us the Trinity doctrine. And even the most modern and most popular theologians that defend the Trinity are lying through their teeth when they tell you that the Trinity doctrine is biblical. But they will not admit, they will not tell us the truth, that they took the Trinity from the Catholic Church. The Reformers, the Protestant Reformation, did not remove the Trinity from their teaching. That is history. Those are real facts that we must look at. I want to thank Dr. Benjamin Summer for being honest about how God moved in the Bible, how the fluidity of God is seen when God manifests in different places, different ways, in a smaller way than who God really is, but in a smaller way to reveal himself unto his creation, unto his prophets, unto those he called to preach the message of the one God. I thank Dr. Summer for being honest about this, and also for being honest and saying that the Trinity does not fit that model. And so we know now that there's only one doctrine, one theology that fits the Bible perfectly, and that is the oneness of God. A few years ago, I did a video on a very famous Trinitarian pastor, preacher from the Bahamas, I believe it's where he was from. And I did a video on him because he made a video on the Trinity. And I was interested to know what he believed about the Trinity. So when I examined the video, I found out that he was confusing the Trinity with the oneness of God. And so I made a video especially on that, how his version of the Trinity was not the Trinity at all, but he was teaching oneness theology. I was so happy I made that video, and immediately it got a lot of likes. A lot of people started viewing the video. But to my surprise, YouTube notified me that the ministry made a complaint against me, and they took my video down. I was hurt about this because I believe in truth. I don't believe in hiding a lie. And so that happened to me a couple of years ago. And then when I studied Dr. Benjamin Summer, the only time he says something like this, that Jews cannot complain or attack the Trinity doctrine because of the fluidity of God, it's the only time he talks in favor of the Trinity, even though he's not a Trinitarian. So I examined that myself and I said, well, what is he saying? Well, it turns out that his view of the Trinity was also incorrect, and it was like that other pastor from the Bahamas. If you look carefully at the teachings of Dr. Benjamin Summer on the Trinity, he says that it was 3 manifestations. And he says other things that tell us that Dr. Summer is confusing the Trinity with the oneness of God. And thought I would say this here because it's important to understand that people sometimes do not understand the Trinity. They have their own ideas, but they're wrong. When you go to the councils and when you go to the Athanasian Creed, which is a forgery, when you go to that, you will find what they really mean by the Trinity doctrine. And no, it does not fit with the fluidity of God or the manifestations of God. According to the fluidity of God, as stated by Dr. Benjamin Summer, God could reveal himself in different places on earth and still be in heaven at the same time, because God is omnipresent, omnipotent, and all of these things. God can do anything at any time. So God could reveal himself, for example, in the Garden of Eden. For example, Genesis 18, God came down to meet with Abraham. It was God and his 2 angels. I've had so many debates on this with other people that are trying to teach that there was a Trinity in chapter 18 of Genesis. But no, there was no Trinity there. Now, Philo of Alexandria taught that there was a Trinity, and there are modern theologians such as Dr. L. Garza who teach the same thing. But no, they're not going with the scriptures. They're going with their own philosophy. I want you to know that I thank Dr. Summer for showing us that it can be attainable. God could take on the form of a human. He could be in Mary as the baby, Jesus. And he could be born and walk this earth. It was God walking inside of Jesus, doing miracles and teaching different things. Jesus is God, and everything he said points to the one God. He even said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And of course, Trinitarians throw that aside. But the truth is, with the fluidity of God, we now know that God, it is possible, and it happened, that God became a man or took on the form of a man to save us from our sins. Jesus Christ is God manifested in the flesh, and Jesus died on the cross. He poured out his blood for us, and now we're so grateful that it was divinity that came to save us. And we have no doubts about this, that Jesus Christ is God. And Isaiah 9:6 says that to us a son is given, a son is born, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and you shall call his name Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. There are so many verses that I can give you, but it is enough to tell you that the fluidity of God continues with oneness doctrine. And so the Jews that turned to Jesus and listen to Dr. Benjamin Summer will connect with us, Oneness Theology, and know that what we're teaching is right along with the scriptures.